Welcome to the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast, the podcast for high achievers who want to stay sharp, focused, and full of energy despite their diagnosis. With your host, National Board Certified Functional Medicine Health Coach, Julie Michelson, where Julie helps you take your power back from autoimmunity. And now here's your host, Julie Michelson.
Welcome back to the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast. I'm your host, Julie Michelson. And today we're joined by Dr. Melinda Ring, Director of Osher Center for Integrative Health and Clinical Associate Professor in the Departments of Medicine and Medical Social Sciences at Northwestern University, Feinberg School of Medicine. She has an active clinical practice while also being an educator, researcher, and author. In today's conversation, we're discussing culinary medicine and food as medicine for autoimmune empowerment. Dr. Ring, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Julie. I'm thrilled to be here with you.
This is one of my absolute favorite topics. I never get bored of talking about the importance of food as medicine. But I love to find out, share with listeners a little bit more about your story and how you got to be, very involved in integrative medicine. Because I think most of us, when we were young, this wasn't necessarily maybe a doctor, yes, but the integrative piece is always interesting.
Yeah. So, it's interesting because I think there's a lot of different paths to what we're going to talk about. And one is integrative medicine. And then the other is culinary medicine. And do you need a drink? Sorry. I'm happy to pause if you need it. Okay. Yeah, anytime.
Coughing off mic there. Sorry.
No problem. So, I think from an integrative perspective, when I think back, I grew up with a dad who's a pathologist, but he was probably one of the only holistic pathologists. And we used to, when I would have a headache, he'd have me visualize it and tell him what color it was and all this until it went away. But then at the same time, I was going in on the weekend and helping him do autopsies. So like a sort of unusual hobby as an 8-year-old. And so I think from just this introduction to medicine as being more than really just the physical, which is what you get during an autopsy, right? There's definitely an essence missing there. But then seeing that there's more to health than just taking a pill when you have a headache, I think that led me down this path to looking at different ways of healing rather than, take a pill, do surgery, like that kind of thing.
Diagnosis, prescription.
Exactly. This, then that. And then for culinary medicine, I grew up in the era when it was all like quick chocolate milk and, dinners and, Wonder Bread was so good for you. And I also grew up where, it was a traditional time when mom cooked meals and, I didn't learn how to cook, frankly. I didn't know how. I was like, and home ec wasn't really there anymore. And so between the summer before medical school, I went and I begged to be a chef. They had a job posting for a sous chef at this really fancy restaurant. And I begged and kept coming back and being persistent until I got the job. Ooh. And then I learned, how to cook, although it was for like 50 people at a time. And so I think I had this appreciation for the art of cooking that started at that point when you could see how to make people happy through food.
Yes, I love that. I grew up, my first and many jobs were in the restaurant business. My stepfather had restaurants. So there is something about even if you don't really take to the cooking piece, that just that love of feeding people and being creative. And I love to cook. So I love culinary medicine. I think we need to be having these conversations, and I grew up in the same, I think the beginning of food not being food, really. And so we're hoping to shift it back to where people are eating real food.
Absolutely. And and so much happened over those eras too that have led to so many of the problems with autoimmune disease now, like even the changes in farming practices and the soil not being overworked and these monocultures of plants losing nutrients and the way animals were raised. Like there's just so much that's just contributed now to this explosion of autoimmune disease we're seeing.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's such a huge topic, and there are so many layers to it. I remember when I was diagnosed in my early 30s, they were, which was a little over 20 years ago. They were saying, oh, you're so young. And now, wow, if you can make it to your 30s without an autoimmune diagnosis, you're doing something right. So it's insane, the explosion. And same with, a little off topic, but I used to teach autistic children in the early 90s when it was rare. And so same thing. So let's dig in. People ask me all the time, and I'm guessing they ask you, well, what should I eat? Just tell me what to eat. So what is your approach? And I think I'm really interested to learn, because I get the feeling there are certain things we differ on, which is always fun and always a learning opportunity.
Yeah, we can arm wrestle it out.
Yes.
So I think like you, so I think we'll agree on this point. I think it does need to be personalized. So I don't think, for example, every single person who has an autoimmune disease needs to avoid gluten, as an example. Like I think many people do, but maybe not everybody. And I think that, and I think that every autoimmune condition may have its own tweak on a typical anti-inflammatory approach. So when I think broadly about what I recommend to my patients with autoimmune disease, it's an anti-inflammatory diet. The issue is that gets defined so differently by people.
Yes.
And so then I think it's a matter of talking to somebody about where they are, what's feasible for them, where are they starting, where can we move them to. I do favor plant-forward diets. For some people that may include a little bit of meat, it may be more pescatarian, but I did my TED Talk on this, and it's like, to me, it's like every plate should be half plants, and at least half plants. And I'm plant-based, so I tell people this is what I do. So I'm preaching what I'm actually doing myself. Right. And
I love that you said plant forward, because again, like anti-inflammatory, the idea of a plant-based diet, to some people that could be vegan, and to some people, and I say I have a plant-based diet, but I do eat clean animal protein. Yeah. But my plate is covered in vegetables. I like the kind of, if you think of the meat as a condiment and not so I think anywhere in there that you fall,
I agree. So we're probably not as far apart as you think. I'm not. No. I personally don't eat red meat, nor does my family. But my son eats poultry, and that's fine. And my husband eats fish, and then my other son and I are plant-based, but we'll eat a little bit of some eggs and dairy. But I think you're right. When people are going for that other half of the plate, or meat as a condiment kind of thing, the quality of the meat helps determine how inflammatory it is. And so if it's a pasture-raised cow that from the meat comes from, then it's going to be very different from a cow that was shoved corn feed and
antibiotics and all the things, living poop.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah.
So
and it's the same.
No guilt. I'm not here to guilt them.
No. And that's why I was excited to have the conversation because, but yeah, I love that you highlighted the quality. I drive on the way to the clinic. I drive past a feed lot, and there is no way you could ever get me to eat any part of an animal that from there. I mean, it's so horrible. And that's the majority of people that are eating meat. That's what they're eating.
Right.
And so, it's a huge difference, and the studies are really impressive.
And it's just also a planetary kind of thing. It's a humanitarian kind of thing,
Yeah.
I think there's a whole energy between how we're
food
that we, that nourishes us. And
absolutely. So broad strokes, how do you define anti-inflammatory then, or maybe not define, but when you say an anti-inflammatory diet, what are you talking about other than loads of veggies?
Yeah, it's a lot of that. It's omega-3s, as I'm sure you've talked to your people about.
Mm-hmm.
We talk, again, it depends where they are. It's because we're talking culinary medicine too. It's not just what's on your plate, but it's how you prepare what you're eating. What are the methods of food that you're eating? What is the quality of the food that you're eating? And, so deep frying versus air frying will have a difference. Eating nightshades in a raw form may have a different effect on the body than eating them when they've been stewed or cooked. And so I don't have any hard lines. I think I try to individualize it. With most people who I see in the early phases of coming to see me, we'll oftentimes do an elimination diet, sometimes food sensitivity testing to help narrow in, but oftentimes an elimination diet, because as you know, that's the gold standard.
Mm-hmm.
The concern, of course, is that in an elimination diet, somebody may do an elimination, add back in the food and not notice a physical difference, but is it still causing something physiologically, like increasing inflammation or increasing permeability in the gut at a subclinical level. But yeah, that's kind of my general approach. Is very plant forward, the classic Mediterranean diet or whatever is culturally appropriate for somebody, and focusing on quality, organic as much as possible, non-GMO as much as possible, and high in those anti-inflammatory foods and phytonutrients, antioxidants, and omega-3s.
Love it. Lots of rainbow eating going on.
Yes, lots of rainbow. Love the rainbow.
And it's so, somebody said to me the other day, you make the best salads.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, they're just, but yeah, they have lots of different things in every color. And, it's fun to introduce to people things that they might not think to be including in their diet. And you mentioned
enjoy a salad, actually.
Yeah. Yes.
Actually be very filling and tasty and
nutrient dense, and not iceberg lettuce with ranch dressing on it or something like that.
Although I do have to say, and maybe this is from growing up in the 70s and having this for dinner almost every night, there is a part of me that still really finds iceberg lettuce despite it.
Oh, me too. That was the only lettuce we ate.
Yeah, it was the only lettuce we ate. And there's still something when I eat it, which maybe it brings back those memories of sitting around the dinner table.
I'm with you. And I'm not saying you can never eat iceberg lettuce. I'm just saying that's not the kind of salad I'm talking about.
Exactly.
And, a lot of people don't drink enough water, and iceberg is loaded with water. So, we're not hating on iceberg. It's just that variety.
You have the iceberg commission coming after you.
The deeper colors, all the things. I love that. And I like that you highlighted, I take a unique approach to reintroductions for the very reason you were just saying. So often either people aren't doing them methodically enough, or they're having a little bit of something and they can't feel anything and they don't notice. And so I we go heavy and hard and several days in a row. And that had originally started just from my own experience of there are foods I can eat once and I can't feel it.
Right.
If I eat the leftovers, or I eat them 2 days in a row, or, I definitely feel it. And obviously doing what I do, I therefore know that means they're inflammatory the whole time. And so, but the other side I see is that people do an elimination diet and they feel great and they want to stay in that elimination phase.
Yes.
And they're just over restricted.
Yeah. I see that as a big problem when people don't have the guidance like you're describing on doing the reintroduction. And, that's what's now being commonly publicized as this orthorexia, where people become scared of food.
And I went through it. I totally went through it. I wasn't guided. My method of healing was kind of spaghetti at the wall. I don't know. And this is why I have a podcast, because I learned a lot from listening to podcasts, and I would try things. And I definitely have a more variety in my diet now than I did even 5 years ago, because that, the rigid worked. And I didn't know, I never really did a proper, I just took stuff away. It wasn't really an elimination phase of a plan. It was, and so it can be a really real thing. I'm an autoimmune paleo coach, and people think AIP, first of all, is a diet. It's not. It's a healing plan. It's a framework. And that elimination phase is supposed to be a phase.
Right.
That's not, don't eat all of these things for the rest of your life. And
the other thing is when the body heals, things that you couldn't tolerate before, you may be able to, at least in moderation or in small amounts. And and I tell people that too, even when if they're not celiac, but they feel better eating gluten, I'll tell them you can occasionally have that Chicago pizza, or go have that birthday cake at New York kid's birthday.
Sorry.
You can do that. Just know you may not feel that great the next day. And but at least you're empowered to make the decisions and
have an understanding of what your consequences are. So it is a choice, not a mistake or a slip or we do the same thing. It's like, what are the never foods? What are the sometimes? And maybe it's like, this is a rare occasion. It's a sometimes food, but it's certainly not going to be the night before I'm giving a presentation or have a big meeting, or, it's really good to know the consequences. And I will eat tomatoes 2-3 times a year because I love them. I grew up in New Jersey.
And they're so healthy. I mean,
they are. And,
all negative.
No, but I know for my body kind of, and again, it goes back to, if I'm going to take a little bit of a hit, I know I'm driving inflammation, and I try to be pretty careful about, it's got to be worth it.
So do you feel like all of the nightshades should be avoided for all autoimmune patients?
No.
Oh, okay. It's personal for you too.
It is. I think there are things, sugar isn't something anybody needs to intentionally include, and we're all going to get some sugar here and there, but like you said, they're nutrient dense, the nightshades. And so same thing. For a long time, I avoided all of them and just thought, oh, they're a problem for me. And I'm still, this is years in, and I'm still like, okay, I really want to try cooked, I'm going to make a tomato sauce. There was a time where I couldn't handle that. And I have healed so much, and I do have celiac. And so I know my gut was a mess, and I know there's a reason why a lot of things were a problem. But the nutrient dense foods, I always want people to include them if they can, for sure.
And that's an example where the culinary medicine part can come into play, because if you're doing it, so, for example, peeling the peeling tomatoes and peppers, taking the seeds out helps decrease those alkaloids. Cooking helps, decrease or break down some of the things like the solanine in potatoes. And so all of those can help instead of just, eating, which I love, like eating raw, those little raw grape tomatoes. Right? But, making a sauce, especially if you peel and de-seed it, can help make it much more tolerable for people who have autoimmune disease.
Absolutely. And that's where it is worth, really being experimental. It's the same thing with dairy. It's so easy. And I grew up, my family was in the dairy business.
Oh, wow.
And I, for a long time, thought I couldn't handle any dairy. I knew it was inflammatory for me. And then, as I learned more and traveled the road a little longer, I learned, hey, some people can tolerate sheep and goat and, even if it's not cow. And I'm somebody I could always do grass-fed butter. My daughter can't. Oh, so it's really interesting. I think that's, if you don't have an allergy, that's more rare. Most people can get away with some grass-fed butter. Yeah. But years in, I found out, oh my gosh, goat cheese is totally fine for me. And these days, you can get goat cheddar and goat mozzarella. I mean, we joke, I make a mean lasagna that is, no cow dairy, no grains, no tomato, no, everyone's like, how is it, it really tastes like lasagna. It's amazing. But I have fun with it, right? It's not, I think that if we shift our brain out of this deprivation, like, okay, I just listed all those things I can't have in my lasagna, which are what most people think of as lasagna. I can enjoy lasagna and it's delicious.
Right. There's so many alternative ways to prepare things. And I think once people remove and get, clear their system of it, they can actually start to taste and enjoy food so much better, so much more, especially once you get out things like processed foods and sugar, like you were saying, the taste buds regenerate and,
it's amazing.
Things are like, oh my gosh, this is delicious. And you never would have liked it before. So
I had a client once ask me, literally, she was totally serious. Were strawberries always this sweet? I'm like, yes, they were. You just couldn't taste it.
Right. Yeah. It's amazing.
It's incredible. So I know we both, you're right. We have a lot of shared, just outlook and approach with, you with your patients and me with my clients. And it does always, I love that you keep highlighting, like, you meet them where they are, right? I work with clients that are men in their 60s that don't cook, all the way to people who love cooking. They just have no idea, how and what to be cooking for themselves.
Yep.
So if you have somebody who's coming to you and they're living on processed food, they don't cook, haven't cooked, where do you even start with them? Like, what's your first up level that you have them do?
Well, I'll give some recommendations, but I'll tell you that I really, for people like that, and I think coaches, people who can coach them and really support them, it's such a huge benefit to helping people with behavior change. There are a lot of people who don't know how to cook or don't like to cook. And and the other thing we have to do is meet them where they are in terms of what's feasible. So, if I have a mom who's working 2 jobs, or I have somebody who doesn't have access to food or doesn't have financial means. So, for example, it's easy for me to say, sure, go to Whole Foods and buy the pre-cut vegetables and Trader Joe's where they have it all prepared. Like, that's a great way to start. But, and so, yes, that would be for the right person. That would be great. For somebody else, that may just be like, oh, this person isn't talking my language. And for them, it may be, recognizing that, for example, frozen vegetables without added stuff in it is a great way to start increasing it. That doesn't require a lot of cooking.
Or cutting.
Yeah, exactly. And they can be very affordable, and they get frozen at their peak place and, can hold on to their nutrients. So I think things like that, I think focusing on, when I teach culinary medicine, we always start with knife skills. And if you're going to fill your plate with plants or make these delicious salads you were talking about, feeling comfortable with a knife and having a good knife is actually probably one of the best things, because I've had students where I'm teaching them, and when they come to a class and they use a sharp knife, and they actually can slice through a vegetable easily instead of hacking at it because they're using this one that's been in their drawer banging against everything. They're like, oh, cutting vegetables isn't so hard. So I think, teaching skills like basic knife skills, batch cooking, so it's not so overwhelming. I think that's a huge thing, to cook larger portions and store the leftovers in the fridge or freezer. We'll talk about that. Simple recipes, trying to give them some guidelines for easy to follow, limited number of ingredients kinds of things. I think all of those are the kinds of things. And then helping them just understand what they have in their kitchen already and what might make it a little bit easier for them, what tools might make it easier for them to be successful, what things they might want to just have in the pantry so that it's easy to throw something easy together with 4 ingredients, like, one fresh ingredient and the rest is you already have, kind of thing, so that you're not just starting from scratch, looking at it and being like, okay, I guess I'll order in again.
I love that. And I think to start with, like you said, basic knife skills. And it is true for people that haven't cooked or aren't from a cooking family, never worked in a restaurant, that probably aren't using a good knife, and probably not a sharp knife. And it's
and they don't know how to do it.
Yeah. And I would say, if you want to know if your knife is sharp, try to slice a tomato. It's not necessarily can it get through the hardest food. Like you want something that can just, cut like butter. So.
And the way that I've always done it with students too, is have them just take a piece of paper. And if you cut through it and it just slices smoothly, you're good to go. But if you try to cut through and it's jagged, like that's a real, you need to sharpen your knife. And there's so many good videos online for people who are new to cooking to get you comfortable. So many that walk you through, free videos. Even like New York Times has a whole series of like knife skills. And so I'll encourage people to do that too. And now, we don't lead these at Northwestern, these shared medical visits, but there are a growing number of medical appointments that you can bill to insurance and that are getting covered by commercial insurance and Medicare, where the group visit, for example, for celiac disease or inflammatory conditions, they come together and there's some educational component, some discussion, and then some hands-on cooking, or at least a cooking demo. And so that's a great movement that we're seeing in medicine in general. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think there's so much value for the patients because I think that's why I always say, my partner, the doc is the, what to do, and the coach is the how to do it. Right. And it doesn't have to be a coach, but whoever it is helping, educate and lead the classes. Without the how, and I'm sure you see it, well, you're giving the how as well, but
I do to some degree, but it depends on the
people just keep coming back in the same place, stuck, because it's like, oh, I know you told me to eat real food. I don't even know what real food is. So, so I love that. I think that is part of what will change wellness and healthcare.
Yeah, and hopefully coaches will, start becoming widely covered by insurance too.
Yeah.
So
and we're getting there. There's codes now. It's,
Right.
it has to start somewhere, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The VA did a great job of, pushing to get a code that level 3 code, and hopefully it'll become a level 1 code.
Exactly.
Soon.
Exactly.
So-
it will, from your lips, right?
Yes.
So I know you said there's no across the board, never ever foods for people. But even for some, occasional gluten might not be the end of the world. Are there things that you like, just off the top of your head, in general, of course, with the exception of if somebody has a sensitivity?
Yeah.
But, are there foods that you think of like, okay, if you have autoimmunity, you really should be including these things in your diet because they're just these power players?
Well, you already mentioned the rainbow. That's really the big thing. And then for me, the omega-3s in whatever form, whether it's from seeds or from sardines or salmon or whatever your omega source of choice is. And healthy fats, so it's not a low fat diet. And then for people, I think also anti-inflammatory herbs and spices, because that helps both with flavor, but also the really concentrated sources of nutrients. So things like, turmeric and ginger and cinnamon and garlic. I think all of those. And in general, I know I said there's can have things once in a while, but if I were to give my these are inflammatory, don't eat these unless you really, really, really have to. That would be things like processed meats, like sausages and hot dogs, and deep fried foods, and of course anything with trans fats, and really limiting refined carbohydrates as much as possible, like the white bread and the donuts and those things that cause issues with insulin, which is so directly correlated with increasing inflammation in the body. So I have the things that I tell my people not to eat, but yeah.
But you're just gentler than I am.
I might be a little gentler. Maybe I'm
in
too
the beginning of a conversation. Well, I'm going to sound a little nicer. But you and I both, to speak the same language as far as it's about empowerment. Like it's not I tell people, and that's why I like the reintroductions. If I'm working with a client, there's no way that 3 years from now, they're going to hear my voice in their head saying, don't eat gluten, it's inflammatory. No, they need to feel, what does gluten do for them? Somebody said to me, oh my gosh, there's no way you haven't had gluten in 15 years, like at all. You don't cheat at all. And I'm like, well, you knew what happened to me when it's not really magical. I get that sick. It's not worth it.
Yeah.
And so that to me is part of that empowerment, is really getting to a place where you can figure out, what foods are triggering you.
Right.
And what foods make you feel amazing.
Yes. And it takes a little time to get there, but it's easier when people have the quick win and start to feel better, or start to see that puffiness go down, and just feel more comfortable in their clothes, and their joints feel better. I've had people who have come in for inflammatory bowel type stuff, and then we're working towards this anti-inflammatory diet of different sorts. It could be more of like a FODMAP diet. It could be more of a more standard classic elimination diet. But then oh, I didn't know, my skin got better. And I didn't realize I was aching. I thought I was just getting older. And I'm like, yeah, it's amazing how these things affect you. But when they came in, they were just like, I want my gut to feel better. And then they, take note of these other things. And that's where it becomes so much easier to stick with it.
That's all the reinforcement we need, is to start to feel better. It really is. It's amazing. And again, it's so motivating. I remember when I was changing diet, and I had a friend who said, I'm really starting to worry about you. You don't eat food, like, you barely eat. And I'm like, I eat so much real food. And this was a woman who was living, I'm not even kidding you, on Diet Dr. Pepper.
Oh my gosh.
And Doritos, I'm like, all I eat is real food, but it was like, I was like, do you remember when I could barely get out of bed?
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand. Now you're worried about me. You should have been worried about me back then. So we just have to change our thinking. And like you said, once we start to get those small wins, we really, the gains, and sometimes it's slow. Sometimes it's really slow. I have a client right now who has RA, and she has an autoimmune gut disorder, and everybody's different. Some people are like, no, I want to jump in and do the elimination. And she was like, that's so overwhelming. Let's work toward it. I said, let's literally just start paying attention to gluten. Let's just start there. Literally her guts. And I'm like, how has nobody ever told you to try going gluten-free for UC and RA? And,
I think you bring up this great point with both of those stories to me, which is navigating social situations and navigating healthcare, because I have had certainly patients with inflammatory bowel disease. This is insane to me, but who have been told by their, noted, well-known gastroenterologist, diet makes no difference to you.
Yes, they still are saying that.
Yeah, I see patients with cancer who have been told that. It just, so I think navigating that can be challenging, and navigating social situations when you're going out, for dinner, when you're going to somebody's house, and, making sure to try to choose restaurants that have autoimmune friendly options, communicating to friends if you're going to their house, or bringing your own if you need to. And, hope the right friend will understand and not take it personally. So I think that is a challenge for people when they're starting on this journey.
Definitely in the beginning. And it is a fascinating thing. Other people really are interested in, aren't you going to eat that? Why aren't you eating that? I don't know why other people care, are so invested in what we eat. We're going away this weekend to visit family, and it was, can Julie eat this? Can Julie eat that? Don't worry about Julie. Julie will worry about herself. It's, but I'm years into this, and it doesn't make me uncomfortable. And I appreciate, people trying to accommodate me. And luckily at this point, I'm not surrounded by anybody who is offended if I can't eat what they're serving. But it takes time. I think it's I don't know that I've ever worked with a client that doesn't come up in the beginning until they really, do feel empowered and understand, why they're avoiding certain things.
Do you find it helpful to have their significant other come in, and then also I'm curious how you manage, because I think one of the biggest challenges is when it's somebody who has to change their diet, but they're also cooking for others, like kids and other things. What's your approach to those?
My approach, and it usually takes a little time. I am not a proponent of double cooking. It could be now adding, something, another, if it's, the kids don't really need a lot of the starch either, but, slowly changing some of those things. I have, and often, and it's usually the woman who's cooking, often, she feels like she has to double cook or triple cook and doesn't have the energy to do any of it. Every single time, eventually the whole family is eating the same way. And they all love it. They all learn to love real food, and the kids are excited about packing healthy lunches. And, and that to me is the biggest gift in what I do, is not just helping somebody recoup their health, but, oh my gosh, now their children aren't growing up on Twinkies,
Yeah, what a gift, because
They don't have to relearn. They don't have to get sick and relearn, decades later.
And there's such a genetic component there's environmental and genetic and other, aspects. And so they're setting up their kids for success, and maybe even delaying or preventing the onset of an autoimmune condition.
Yeah. And I think that is such a, it is, yes, genetics, yes, environment, and what people are often just attributing to genetics, because my mom had and my aunt had, but you are all eating the same way. You were all using the same, personal care products. You were all, so it's never just genetics. Mm-hmm. And again, I say it like, oh, it's so simple, don't double cook. It's a process. And again, start where you're comfortable. But literally, I have not had one family that hasn't all eventually ended up on board really willingly.
Yeah, well, it's a healthy diet, right? So it's and it tastes good. I think there's that transition period. So.
There is for sure. I always think about when I was a kid. I had a friend she was the youngest of 10, and obviously very big family. Her parents, and I don't know why it stuck with me. Like even then I knew there was something to it. And now I just think it's gold. Her parents were brilliant. They would, when they would cook a vegetable or something that they wanted the kids to eat, the first time they made it, they would make a really small portion and they would say, this is just for us. Just for the adults. You can have a taste.
Yeah.
But it's just for us. And literally that was how they got their kids to eat everything.
That's really funny.
Yeah. And so
psychology on your kids with vegetables.
Well, but I think the reason it stuck was I kind of realized there is something to this thinking I'm not going to like it. Or, if they want me to eat it, it must be healthy and I don't want it kind of deal. And so, yeah. And I don't remember ever seeing iceberg lettuce at her house, actually. So it's, so I love them, and I highlight again, the start where you are. And I think, I'm guessing you have a similar approach just because we seem very aligned in this. We tend to focus on avoid this and take that out and, eliminate this. And so, if you're somebody who's starting and you're not on a real foods diet, just start adding in before you ever start taking away. Start playing with some more vegetables.
Yeah, that's always my first go-to, is just the more plants kind of thing. Because once you fill up at least half a plate with colorful fruits and vegetables, non-starchy ones, you have room for less. And so just automatically you're going to start making, healthy changes and start feeling better. And
you can, even as an adult, eat your vegetables first.
Yes.
I went through that with my mom when I was helping her learn and adjust her eating. She would say, well, I just can't eat that many vegetables. I'm full. And I'm like, well, you don't have to eat a ribeye first, and so we joke around here. I love vegetables. I don't ever think I have to get these in. But even if you do feel that way, then start with them first.
Yeah. I mean, this is a little off topic, but I think what too many people are dealing with right now, because of the diets that they've been eating, is a lack of awareness of hunger. And so it's almost the opposite problem, is that they'll just keep going. And that usually is in processed foods and sugar and
And that's where that adding in, the healthy fats keep you full. But you're right. We have to almost learn satiety, and this is what it feels like to be full, and I'm good. Somebody was asking me the other day, well, what do you snack on? And I'm not anti-snack. I think if you need it, when you're adjusting things, or if you need a snack, I don't portion control. I think of like ratios, like, cover your plate in the veggies and it takes care of itself. But I don't really snack often because at this point, because I eat I have a lot of healthy fats in my diet. I don't get hungry an hour after I eat. Like, I just don't.
Yeah. And protein keeps you satiated too.
Proteins and fats.
And that is one of the things where there's this whole myth of like, well, if I only eat plants, then I won't get enough protein, which of course is totally not true. Very easy to get plenty, even if you're a weight trainer. But
again, if you're eating real food, and that's, I think, another, if you're eating processed vegan food that's not really food, you're not probably going to get enough protein.
Yeah, or you're getting the protein, but it's with a bunch of other
junk,
so great stuff.
Yeah, I love it. So we've covered so many things, and you've already given so many tips, but listeners know that at the end of every episode, I always ask for that.
Oh, no, I didn't get a warning for this. Okay. All right.
Throwing you under the bus. It could be something you've already said, but really it just comes down to what's one thing listeners can do today to start to improve their health.
Well, I know you've already hammered on the rainbow, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go with what we talked about, which is make sure you're, get comfortable for food, not for other things. Get comfortable with a knife. Remember.
I love the disclaimer. Melinda said,
there's too much violence in the world.
That's true.
There's a phrase I've heard, which is "love the food that loves you back," and so I think that shift to that, and cut up your vegetables and have them pre-cut in the refrigerator, so it's easy. It's at eye level, easy thing to go for. Just for me, it's all about making these changes easy, because we get busy and we get hungry, and then other priorities. And that sugar buzz or, the snack, the easy snack is the easy choice. So we have to make healthy easy.
I love it. We have to make healthy easy. I knew you couldn't give just one, by the way. But it's okay, because most people can. But it is so true. I always tell people, when I'm trying to get people to prep, same thing. I have so many clients that are like, oh, I buy vegetables, and then I throw them out.
And they go bad. Yeah.
But I say this, even me, like, it's not that those of us that do this day in and day out are really any different. We just already are prepping. I can either make a salad or eat a salad at lunchtime. I don't have enough time in my day to do both. So it's got to be prepped ahead of time. So I love that.
Yeah.
Yes.
When I'm in the middle of patients and I have half an hour, which then becomes 15 minutes.
Right.
I'm not going to go start cutting vegetables and everything to make a healthy meal. And so it's either grab a snack bar or have something ready to eat that's healthier.
Amazing. And we will have all the links, but for people that listen on the go, like I do, where's the best place to find you?
Well, you can find all my links at drmelindaring.com. And then that'll link to my YouTube and my Instagram. I think for quick wins and hits, Instagram's the place to go. But I'm growing my YouTube channel. So, but if you go to Dr. Melinda Ring, you'll get links to all of them.
Amazing.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for having me, Julie.
Oh my gosh. Melinda, thank you so much. This has been so much fun. I knew I was going to learn a lot. I get really obviously geeked out and excited when we get to have conversations where people can hear in other voices a similar approach. And I love what you're doing. And I love this idea of culinary medicine. I think that is medicine, right?
Yeah.
Hippocrates. Like this is not new.
Medicine. Absolutely. All right. Well, so you thought we were going to be further apart, but we're pretty close
I did.
together.
We are really pretty close. I just may be a little more of a stick in the mud than you are. And that's okay. I can deal with that.
I'm a little more anti-meat than you are. So,
yes, it's true.
Okay. Yeah.
It's true. But again, it's all about what serves each one of us. And so I just am really grateful for everything you shared today.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been great to be here.
For everyone listening, remember you can get the transcripts and show notes by visiting inspiredliving.show. I hope you had a great time and enjoyed this episode as much as I did. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to Julie Michelson's Inspired Living with Autoimmunity. Did you enjoy this episode? Please like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to get a transcript of this and every other episode, just head on over to inspiredliving.show or click on the link in this episode's description. There, you can also find everything we discussed in this episode, including links and information about our guest. You can even send in your questions to be answered by Julie in a future episode. That's inspiredliving.show. Until next time, this is Julie Michelson's Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast, helping you take your power back.